Okay, so this is lesson 5 in Hebrew from the very beginning, book 2. And we'll start out with the homework assignment that was sent last week. So the sentences from English translating to Hebrew. First one, I don't recognize many cities in the United States. And that in Hebrew is Ani lo makir harbe arim b'artzot habrit. Makir, that verb is from book 1, toward the end of book 1. Arim, right? That's the plural of city, which is ir. Arim, b'artzot habrit. Okay. Second one, we traveled to Italy last year. That'll be Nasanu l'Italia b'shana she'avra. B'shana she'avra, last year. She left the gas station very early. Hi yatsa mitachanat haderek me'od mukdam. You could also do mukdam, me'od. There's nothing wrong with that. Me'od can go either side of the adjective. Okay, so hi yatsa mitachanat haderek, from the station, the gas, the fuel station. And then when we got out of the car, we heard it. So kshe, right, is the prefix, which means when or while. Kshe yatzanu mea mechonit, from the mechonit. Right? Shamanu oto, or shamanu etze. Right? So oto or etze, either one of those would be fine. Translation for it, right? We heard it. Shamanu oto, or shamanu etze. Now the Hebrew to English ones. The first one, hu rats letachanat ha'otobus, aval ha'otobus kvar yatsa. Okay, so this is going to be past tense. Obviously, we can tell by the context of it, because at the end we say kvar yatsa, past tense. Right? So hu rats letachanat ha'otobus. He ran to the bus station. Aval ha'otobus kvar yatsa, but the bus had already left. Right, he ran to the bus station, the bus had already left. המכונית גדולה מדי כדי לנהוג בה ברחוב הזה. המכונית גדולה מדי כדי לנהוג בה ברחוב הזה. So that means the car is too big to drive on this street. So midai is too, right? גדולה midai, too big. כדי is like in order. So you just use that word in places like this when you have two things connected, right? It's too big to be able to drive it, or right, כדי לנהוג, in order to drive it on the street. Okay, then we have אנחנו מאוחרים כי יונתן נהג. We are late because Jonathan drove. אנחנו מאוחרים כי יונתן נהג. And then the last one. יש הרבה יהודים מהארץ שאוהבים לנסוע. There are a lot of Jews from the land that love to travel. This is very true. The national parks that we go to out here that are nearby, almost every time I go, I meet an Israeli family or Israelis at the national parks there. They do love to travel, that's for sure. Okay. Let's look at the vocabulary from the lesson. Okay, so this is lesson 5 in the book. If you have your book, you can turn there. So the first, we'll go over the verbs. So we have la'alot, which means to go up. La'alot. So if you're familiar with the word aliyah, when an Israeli makes aliyah, it means that they're making an ascension, right? They're going up. They're ascending to Israel. La'alot, so it comes from this verb, la'alot, which means to go up, to ascend. Okay, in Hebrew this is used for boarding, okay, so like if you're boarding a plane or a bus, they use this word, la'alot. Ani ole la'otobus, I'm going up to the bus, I'm boarding the bus, right? Or same thing with a plane, ani ole la'matos, I'm going up to the airplane. La'alot. Okay, and then let's just cover each of the verbs in the infinitive, and then we'll go back and look at past tense. So liknot. Liknot is to buy. Liknot. I remember one of my friends talking about how to remember this word. He said, it's like you're leaking notes out of your wallet, right? Like your bank notes out of your wallet. To leak note. You know, buy something. To leak notes. And then I don't see two of the verbs here. We may have gotten left off somehow. Let me put them in here. So we have limkor, also in this lesson. Limkor, which is to sell. Limkor, to sell, and then the other one is lihiot. Lihiot, which just means to be. And lihiot, you probably know that we don't use being verbs in the present tense, right? So am, is, and are we don't use, but we do have the verb to be. And it's used in past tense and in future tense, but it's just not used in the present tense, okay? So lihiot, to be. All right, so those are the four verbs from the lesson. Now let's just take a quick look at how we're going to conjugate them. So with limkor, you already know how to use that one in the past tense. It's going to follow the standard pa'al patterns. In the present tense, it's going to be mocher, mocheret, mocherim, right? Past tense is going to be machal, machalt, right? Machalti, I sold, machalti, we sold, machalnu, machal, right? The other third person form, she sold, he machra, they sold, him machru, הם מכרו את המכונית שלהם. They sold their car. Okay. So that's limkor. So that one is standard pa'al. The other three that we looked at here, we have lihiot, la'alot, and liknot. Okay. So these three, all three of these, the last root letter is hey, right? And we already know from the present tense that hey on the end with that hey as the last root letter, you end up with some things that are a little bit different, okay? So it's also true of the past tense, right? If you remember in the present tense, with verbs ending in hey, it's going to be ole for the masculine, ola for the feminine, kone, kona. And then, because standard thing for pa'al in the present tense is going to a tav, right? So mocher, mocheret, right? Just like choshev, choshevet, that's standard pa'al. But then when it ends with a hey, hey is the last root letter, then in the present tense, it's just changing the vowel, ole, ola, right? And then when we get to the past tense, it causes some other issues. Okay? So, first off, we'll just look at this one, liknot, okay? Kaniti is going to be how you say I bought. Kaniti, okay? So normally with pa'al ones, it's and then you add the suffix ti, right? Like chashavti or nahagti, right? But with these, when the hey is the last root letter, you can't add on to that hey as the last root letter, right? We don't ever add on to a hey on the end of a word in Hebrew. In Hebrew, if you're adding a suffix to a word that ends in hey, the hey is going to change or just disappear. Sometimes it disappears, sometimes it changes to a tav or a yod. Okay, within verbs, with verbs in the past tense, the hey will always change to a yod. Okay, so that's what happens here. So that's why we have that extra e vowel. Kaniti. Kaniti is I bought. Kaninu is we bought. Kanita or kanit to a man, right? Or woman. Ma kanit, what'd you buy? Lo kaniti shum davar. I didn't buy anything. Kanitem. Okay, and then in the third person forms, it's similar, but again, it's a little different. So we have kana, which is the basic form, which is just the root. So he bought is just going to be he kana, hukana, just like you would expect. Hukana. And then when you go into the feminine, it's he kanta. So that hey, right, like we said before, the hey can't just stay as a hey and you add another hey. The hey changes to a tav in this case. Okay, so feminine third person in the past tense. If the root already ends with hey, you're going to add a tav in the middle there, basically. Or technically that hey changed to a tav, and then you add the hey for the feminine, like you would with normal ones, like with think, right? Chashav, chashva, that's the standard ending for the feminine third person, is adding the hey. Chashav, chashva, kana, kanta. So we're just changing that hey to a tav, and we add the hey. Kanta, and then when you go to the plural, is kanu. So we're adding the vav, standard, but the hey disappears. So within a verb in the past tense, you see all three different things that can happen with a hey on the end of a word. It can change to a yod, it can change to a tav, and it can just disappear. The three things that could happen to a hey when you're adding a suffix of some kind onto the end of a word. Okay, so this is the way it will always work. Every binyan with hey as the last root letter, the feminine in third person is going to have an extra tav in there, right? Kanta. And the plural is the hey is just going to disappear, and you're going to add your vav with the u sound. So kanu, kanta, kana. And then with all the other forms, first and second person forms, it changes to a yod. Kaniti, kaninu. Okay, so let's just go over it with another one of the verbs. So with la'alot, we have aliti, I went up, right? Alinu would be we went up. You went up, alit, or alita to a man, right? Alitem, you all went up. Excuse me. Okay, and then when we go to third person forms, the first one is always just going to be Allah, right? Just the root, ayin, lamed, hey. And then we go to the feminine, is alta, Allah, alta, and alu. Example sentence, He alta lamatos mukdam. She boarded the plane early. He alta lamatos mukdam. Lama him lo alu kvar. Why haven't they already gone up? Lama him lo alu kvar. And people use this verb in Hebrew. They will use this verb like the way we use aliyah in English. We say he made aliyah. But in Hebrew you can just say hu ala la'aretz. So he went up to the land. Hu ala la'aretz. Alinu la'aretz lifnei shnatayim. We went up to the land. We moved to Israel 2 years ago. Alinu la'aretz lifnei shnatayim. Okay? And another way that this verb is used, la'alot, another way it can be used, is in the phrase, how much does this cost? Okay? So most Israelis will just shorten it to kamazeh. So that's all they say is, how much is this? Kamazeh. But technically, to say how much does this cost, you say kamazeh ole. Okay, so basically, to what does this go up, right? What's the price that it's going to make this go up to? Kamazeh ole is the full phrase. But most of the time, people just say kamazeh. But it's interesting to know. Okay, so that's how it works anytime you have a hey as your last root letter with a pa'al verb. You already know a lot of pa'al verbs that end with hey as the last root letter. These are very common. So other examples would be words like lirot, right, to see, lishtot, to drink, la'asot, to make or to do. So you already know a lot of other ones. So just go over a couple examples with those. So with lishtot, you would say shatiti, I drank, right? We drank would be shatinu. Shatiti, shatinu. She drank is going to be shatta. So notice you have two tavs, right? Because shatta is the root, shatta, and then when you go to the feminine third person, that hey changed to a tav, and then you add your hey, shattata. He shattata meats. She drank juice. Shatta, shattata, and then shatu, they drank. Okay. Ra'u, ra'iti, ראינו, מה ראית? מה ראית שם? What did you see over there? מה ראית שם? And then let's go over that last one from the lesson. So lihiot, with the verb lihiot, in the past tense. Let's look at third person first. So based off the root, haya, right? So just the is the vowels. The root is hey, yod, and hey. So haya. You're probably already familiar with this from songs and stuff. Asher haya vehove veyavo. You might know that song. Holy, holy, holy. Haya was, you go to the feminine. Again, adding the tav, haita. Okay, so haya, haita, and then hayu. Hem hayu babank. They were at the bank. Hem hayu babank. Hu haya atzuv. He was sad. Hi haita smecha. She was happy. Okay, and then going on to the first and second person forms, we have hayiti. Hayiti. So notice, right? Haya is the root. Then that hey changes to a yod, just like with kana, kaniti, right? Or shatiti. Hayiti is I was. Okay? Hayiti sham. Af pam lo hayiti sham. I was never there. Hayiti sham pam. I was there once. Hayiti sham. Okay, so with all of these, you're going to have a double yod, right? Hayiti, hayinu, hayit, hayita, hayitem. So all of those you end up with the double yod. Also, it's worth noting that another common spelling on this one is with two yods, okay? So this one doesn't have to be that way. This is just an alternate spelling. And it's really about 50-50 as far as people that their style is to do one yod or two yods. They're very common either way. Haya, haita. But just remember, with all the first and second person forms, you have to have two yods. Otherwise, it'll get confused with something else. Okay, and now let's look at the other vocabulary words from the lesson. We have the word kesef, which means silver. In biblical Hebrew, it means silver. And in modern Hebrew, it also just means money, which it's used that way somewhat in biblical Hebrew because a lot of times when people are buying stuff with money, it's talking about kesef, silver, that they're using. Now, even though they don't use silver money, they still call money silver. Kesef. Kesef is the Hebrew word for money. Mechir is the word for price. Mechirim, prices. Chanut is the word for a shop. So this is especially smaller shops so that specialize in something. It's more what these are for. So like if you said Chanut Sfarim would be a bookshop. Chanut Sfarim. Or a gift shop. Chanut Judaika, a Judaica shop, like a little souvenir shop in Israel. So Chanut is generally a small shop. Okay. You already learned the word super, which is like a supermarket, and then there's the word makolet, which is like a grocery store. Chanut is more of a shop that specializes in something. Okay, it's also worth noting the plural on this one is a little bit different than what you might expect. It's chanuyot. Okay, so because you already end with the tav, chanut, when we go to the plural, we add a yod vav tav. So chanut and chanuyot. Chanut and chanuyot. Then we have the word shekel. Shekel obviously is the Israeli currency. It's also a weight, which is kind of interesting. The root here, shekel, is just the word for weight. So in Hebrew now, lishkol means to weigh something. Okay, lishkol. So shekel is just from that exact root, a weight of silver, right? You remember in biblical Hebrew, you usually say a shekel kesef, right? A shekel of silver. So it's a measurement of weight. Okay, this here is an acronym, right? We touched on acronyms last week, I think, about how they write those with a letter and then the two geresh, gilshayim, two gereshes, right? Shin and Chet. So this is the acronym for the new Israeli shekel. So this is just shekel chadash. So the Chet is chadash, the Shin is shekel. Shekel chadash. New Israeli shekel is what that stands for. Okay, and then we have the word dollar. Dollar is a dollar. That one should be easy enough. Okay, then we have the word yakar. Yakar is expensive. It can also be used like dear. So to say, like if someone's writing a letter, they might say, yeah, whatever. You say the person's name and then hayakar. So Yosef hayakar or Miriam hayakara would be like dear. But it's also just used as expensive. So you could say the price is expensive. Hamechir yakar. The opposite of yakar is zol. Zol means cheap. Zol. And then we have the word midai, which means two. Okay, so this word, I think that was assigned in one of your homework sentences, which hadn't been covered yet. But midai means two. So it's used with an adjective, right? To say too much or too of something too big, right? Gadol midai is too big. Too much. Ze yoter midai, that's too much. Ze yoter midai. So when you're in the shuk and someone's telling you a price that's not good, you say ze yoter midai. That's too much. Okay, gadol midai, too big, right? Yakar midai, too expensive. So you can use that with an adjective. So the full form, basically, yoter midai is too much. Okay, so you can use that with an adjective. So like down here on this line, we have yoter midai gadol. Yoter midai gadol. And that's saying too much, big. But it's the exact same thing as gadol midai. Okay, so those mean the exact same thing. This is just basically the full form. Yoter midai gadol. Most people would just say gadol midai. But that is basically the full proper form of it. Yoter midai gadol. Okay? So those are all of the words from the lesson. One other thing I want to touch on with haya, okay? So the word haya, which means was, right? Lihiot. This is used because they don't have present tense things, right? If you remember how to say, like, I have, right? You say yesh li, there is to me. So yesh, there is kind of the present tense being type thing, right? Because you're saying there is something, and it's current, right? It's right now. Yesh, there is. So haya is used to say I had, so in past tense. So yeshli means I have right now, and then hayali would be I had. So I could say hayali kadur. I had a ball. Okay? And then if it was multiple things that were to you, right? You're saying the things basically were to me one thing, right? Because was to me a ball, were to me if it's multiple things, right? For plural. So you would say hayu. Hayuli sfarim. I had books. Hayuli harbe sfarim. I had a lot of books. And then obviously if the noun is feminine, you would use haita. Right? So like with the word mechonit, which is feminine, you could say haita li mechonit. I had a car. And that is used with any of them, just like with yeshli, yeshlo, yeshla, right? How that whole thing breaks down. It's the same thing with this. You would say hayala, right? She had. Hayala kelev. She had a dog. Okay? Or hayu lahem klavim. They had dogs. Hayu lahem klavim. Okay, so it just depends on the item that you're talking about, which form of this you use, and the person you're talking about, la, right, whether it's li or lo, lahem. So that's another major function of the word haya and lihiot. Also, there's two irregular verbs, tzarich, which you already know, and yachol. Okay, so with these two verbs, sometimes haya is used with these. So like, because yachol, technically the past tense form is the same as the present with he did it. or he is able. So like to say he yachol lashir, he can sing, but then to say he could sing, past tense, he was able to sing. They say hu haya yachol lashir, just to clarify that it's past tense. So that's one of those irregular verbs where they do that. Tzarich is also like this. If you remember, tzarich doesn't fit into any binyan. It's not a standard verb at all. Okay, so need, tzarich, tzricha. With this, so it doesn't conjugate into the past tense. So the only way to say need in past tense is to use haya with it. Okay, so examples of this are going to be hu haya tzarich. Okay, he needed. Hu haya tzarich od kesef. He needed more money. Okay, I needed is going to be haiti tzarich or haiti tzricha, right? If it's feminine. So if a woman is talking, she'll say haiti tzricha. I needed. I would say haiti tzarich. I needed. Okay, so you're using the correct form that you would expect of haya, and then use the correct form again of tzarich. And that's how you do the past tense with that verb, because it's an irregular verb that doesn't have a past tense. It can't conjugate the past. Okay, haiti tzarich. We needed, so that's going to be plural, right? Hayinu, we needed, we were needing, right? If you literally break it down, we were needing. Hayinu tzrichim. Okay, that covers everything in the lesson that I had. Are there any questions? How do I go back and forth between Hebrew and English typing? So that I just have it set up as a key on my computer. I just go Alt-Shift, hit Alt-Shift, and then it switches keyboards. So you can set that up in your computer settings. Just go to like region and language, and then language. This is on a PC or Windows, obviously. And then you can set up how to switch. So you could set it to any keys you wanted. It could be like, Control Shift or anything, and to switch keyboards once you've added the keyboards onto your system. Haya. Haya is past tense. That means was. Yeah, hu haya. Was. Yeah, so there is no present tense form of haya. Because, well, there is a form of it, but it's just not used. So it would be hove. Hove is present. That is, the only way that word is used, though, is just to say the present tense. So like if you're saying, what is this verb in the present tense? It would be ma pa'ala ze behove. So hove is just a word that's not really used. Because we don't say am, is, are, right, in Hebrew. All right, any other questions? All right, well, thanks for tuning in. If you have questions during the week, you're always welcome to just shoot me an email. We'll get some homework sent out probably tomorrow morning. And we'll see you next week. להתראות כולם.